The popular movies Ghost and Flatliners describe what more than 11 million Americans have now reported, namely that they have had a near-death experience in which they left their body, traveled through a dark tunnel, recognized friends and loved ones who had died, and encountered a supreme being of light. Are their near-death experiences real evidence for life after death? Some people have reported they found themselves in hell, not heaven, during their near-death experience. Do their frightening hell experiences indicate it may not be safe for us to die? My guests will be answering these questions include Dr. Maurice Rawlings, a specialist in cardiovascular diseases, who has documented in his book, To Hell and Back, some of the terrible hell experiences his patients have seen who have clinically died and been resuscitated. Nancy Evans Bush, president of the International Association of Near-Death Studies, one of the most prestigious organizations in America, collecting information on near-death experiences. June Langley, a nurse who has cared for over 500 children who have died of terminal diseases. Dave Hunt, internationally known Christian researcher and author of the best-selling book, The New Spirituality. Howard Storm, an atheistic professor who, as a result of having a hell experience, believed on Christ and has become a Christian pastor. And finally, Dr. John Weldon, author of more than 40 books on comparative religion. We invite you to join us for this edition of the John Ankerberg Show. Welcome to our program. You know, one thing that you have in common with us is the fact is that we're all going to die. And it's very interesting that when we contemplate this experience of death that's ahead of us, that 11 to 13 million Americans, according to a survey that George Gallup put out, suggested that they've had what is called a near-death experience. And we're going to talk about what a near-death experience is today and what are the implications. What are people seeing? Are there good, are there bad near-death experiences? And Nancy, I'd like you to start us off with a definition. This is your area. What is a near-death experience, so that my mother and a lot of other people that might not be acquainted with these terms, what is it?
It's a very powerful experience that happens when people are close to death. It may include, oh gosh, a dozen or so components. Feelings of peace, feelings of moving very rapidly through a tunnel. There's often a light, often a sense of presences, sometimes a review of one's life. A person may feel he's just saturated with knowledge, sometimes a choice as to whether to come back, or many people are simply told it is not yet your time, and then a return, and it changes people's lives.
And near-death basically means that they might have been in an accident, they might have been in a collision, and at the spot where they had the collision, all of a sudden they kind of leave their body, or the fact is they see themselves going through this tunnel and so on, and they see this light and so on. And this is where they get this sense of well-being and peace, etc. So you call that a near-death experience. Yes. They don't die because they come back. It's near death. All right, Dr. Maurice Rawlings, what is the difference between a near-death experience and a clinical death experience?
Clinical death is when the heart stops, you're flatline, breathing stops, it requires a resuscitation. And this is just a short time before the brain dies, the most sensitive tissue without blood supply, before biologic death occurs, and now a resurrections require something we can't do.
You don't do resurrections?
No, not yet. We're trying. Resuscitation is our specialty.
Okay. So basically, when you have a guy on the treadmill and he has a heart attack, and the fact is he goes into unconsciousness, and you're trying to bring him back, you're talking about that's a clinical death experience. If you don't resuscitate him, he's a dead duck.
He's dead.
Okay. And so you bring him back, and when he comes back, that's when they tell you these stories of what they've seen.
So my experience is clinical death, not near-death experiences. Clinical death, the closest we can come to not coming back at all.
Okay. But let me be the skeptic here for a little bit, Nancy, because there's probably more doctors and skeptics that watch this program than you believe in any other kind of a Christian kind of context. And the fact is they would say to me, well, Ankerberg, you got to ask the hard question. So let me ask the hard question. I've seen on Donahue and Oprah, where a lot of you people have appeared there, they usually bring in a guy that doesn't believe anything that you're talking about in terms of this near-death experience being real or having any implications. And this is basically the way they would say, and I'd like to hear how you'd answer this, okay? How would you answer the materialistic skeptic who says the near-death experiencer, he really didn't experience or she really didn't experience anything. What you saw was only in your mind. You didn't leave your body. It was just your overactive imagination or like a dream. Or the medical scientist, and you guys can jump in here, how would you answer the fellow that says, here's what really took place. At moments of stress, the body has its own mechanism. It dumps chemicals into the bloodstream, including polypeptides that attach to the brain's endorphin receptors, and it reduces pain and it creates a euphoria. It's automatic. So this is probably the cause. You got a hallucination, you got dreams going on, you haven't left your body at all. How do you respond to that?
There are about 12 arguments like that. And it may be lack of oxygen, any of these physiological bases. And frankly, my bottom line on this is that every human experience is a physiologically based experience because we are physiological creatures. That's how we work. So simply to say, oh, but look, if we tickle this part of the limbic system, if we dump endorphins into the system, bam, you get some aspect of an experience. You get some aspect of an experience, maybe, but lives don't change.
Let me jump in here also. You can't explain it physiologically because often they, and it's documented, they see what's going on far away. Their senses couldn't possibly, the body couldn't possibly be involved. I mean, you've got many cases like that of the person who is dead and they follow the funeral hearse. They know what's happening in the home, so it couldn't possibly be explained physiologically.
Well, you're talking about recall, and that's the veracity of these experiences. How can they recall the nurse had earrings on over there, you were standing with your plaid coat, I saw you working on my body, and I'm up here at the ceiling or someplace else. Recall, about 10%. The sequence, how can we all have the same dream out of the body? 1, 2, 3, 4, the same sequence. Physiologic, yes, but anoxia, CO2, you can't duplicate these things. Tickling the neurons, as Dave says, you can get pictures, you can't get sequences.
Right.
But
well,
Dr. Ryan, I'm talking about seeing something that's happening miles away from where that body is.
Yeah.
That cannot be explained physiologically.
We're going to take a break right here, folks, and when we come back, I'm going to ask Dr. Weldon to come in here. There are 3 examples that have really caught my attention. One that Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross shared with me while she was on this program. One about a blind person. And these 3 examples we want to share with those of you who are skeptical about a near-death experience really being something that we ought to look at. So I hope that you stay tuned. All right, we're back. We're talking with this crowd of folks about clinical and near-death experiences. What do they tell us? And the skeptic that is tuned in and said, well, it's nothing more than what is going on in your brain. The fact is you're having a dream. It's just like you're sleeping at night. You can think that you're in other places, but the fact is it's all in your head. Or the other doctor that might say, well, the fact is there are chemicals that are dumped into your body at times of stress, and the fact is they're giving you these hallucinations and so on. There are some illustrations that are coming up that would say it's got to be more than that, all right? Howard, give me one illustration.
Carol Roberts from Independence, Kentucky had an aneurysm in her brain. She was rushed to the hospital, almost unconscious. It burst while the doctor was exploring it, and she left her body. Her husband was outside in the parking lot praying, because they were a good Christian couple, and he was praying as hard as he could, silently, that God would spare her life. She went out and heard his prayers while she was being operated on, and after the operation, they took her to recovery. They expected her to be unconscious for days.